Alrighty, today is the 29th of October, 2003, and this is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Willie R. Perkins. Mr. Perkins lives at 208 Brookside Road in DeRidder, Louisiana. He was born October 23rd, 1915. He's married to Edna. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay. They have 4 children, 7 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. And thank you very much for coming down today.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Let's start at the very beginning. Where were you born? Where were you born?
Juanita, Louisiana.
Juanita?
Yeah, Juanita.
Where is that?
That's right down below the river, about 30 miles. That's on the old KCS Railroad. First railroad was laid through there.
Is that right? Yeah.
But there was a tram road there when I was there, when my daddy was there. And they was cutting that virgin pine with it was dead, and there was a tram road in there before the KCS come down from Kansas City.
I see. You know something, I just remembered something. We have more than one person here, and I should introduce everybody. We have Peggy Hines, Willie's daughter, Edna, Willie's wife, obviously. We have Carl Hines, who is Peggy's husband. And off in the corner is Mike Montgomery, a history teacher at Bossier
Parish Community College.
Yeah, I just want to say Bipsy. Bossier Parish Community College, thank you. Okay, and I'm Phil Lynch, interviewing for the Norton Art Foundation. How long did you live in Juanita?
3 months.
And where'd you go?
And we went to Fullerton Sawmill.
And where's that?
That's right about 15 miles, no, it's about 30 miles out of DeRidder.
Okay.
Over on Perkins was a little town. They didn't have a high school there then.
How long
At Perkins, but they did at Fullerton. It was a modern sawmill that, like I told you, cut all that lumber in there.
Did your dad work there?
Huh?
Did your father work there?
No, he worked at Craven Sawmill. There was a Craven Sawmill there, Pickering Land and Timber Company. And he worked there.
What did he do?
He was a roundhouse. He worked the car knocker, they called it.
All right, you're going to have to explain that to me. What's a car knocker?
Well, they fixed all them wheels and brakes and everything on them flat cars that they pull them logs in with off the main line. Yeah.
That's what he did.
I tell you what he made a day.
What was that?
$2.50.
Wow. Wow. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I had 9.
9?
Well, including myself.
That's a big family.
Yeah. We all push one another away from the fireplace, keeping warm.
Well, how long did you live in Fullerton at the sawmill area?
Well, I stayed there till 1935. I listened to the tie down of all them old whistlers on Fullerton and Craven. And when they closed out, why, Pickering Land and Timber Company went to where my daddy was working for. They went to Fullerton, California. They backed the freight train in there and told us that you can load all your belongings on it, and they backed the passenger train in there. They had a track over to KCS and said, you can go along with us if you want to. That was 1926.
26.
Yeah, and it cut out, you see. And I told my daddy one day we was working after that, and I said we was down on a little farm, and it was pretty rough after they left out. We had all convenience when the mills was in there, you know. I said, I've heard of missing the boat, but I said, we missed the train.
So you didn't go to California with him? You stayed right there?
No, we stayed right there. Duffed it out.
What'd you do as a kid? What was life like?
Plowed. I plowed one yoke oxen. You know, put one oxen with a little yoke over him like a collar on a horse.
Yeah. Is that right? You plowed with an oxen?
Yeah. And we walked 3 miles to school, and we lived too close to ride the covered wagon. We lived too close to school.
So, did you have a farm or?
Yeah, we had a little 10-acre farm up there. We raised them 9.
Really? What'd you raise?
Huh?
What did you raise on it?
We raised cotton, corn, and sweet potatoes, turnip greens, collards.
Yeah.
I told them the other day, I said, you know, we got four commodities now. We had 4 commodities then, now we got 400.
Yeah, life is getting more complex. Did you raise any livestock?
Yeah, we had cows. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, we milked China cows. You know what a China cow is now?
No.
That's got pole in China. He had to pull the heck out of her to get a teacup full of milk.
Oh, did you? Okay. Well, so did you go to school in Fullerton? I mean,
Yeah, I started the school at Gravel Hill. It was a church and a school. And today it's back there. I got my tomb set up, everything there. I told Carl, I said, you won't have to do nothing but pay for closing the gate. And I got 3 funeral homes that I belong to.
Is that right? Sounds like you're ready, Willie.
Yeah.
Well prepared. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen for a long time. Well, tell me what you did for fun when you were a kid.
Farming?
No, what did you do for fun? For fun?
Fun?
Yeah.
Oh, we just swim, fish, and go down the creek and take a bath. You know, there wasn't no modern convenience then. It moved out. You know.
Yeah. What was your house like?
Huh?
What was your house like? 1-story house, 2-story house? Where you lived?
Oh, it was just a one-story box house. You could see the dogs sometime run on the floor.
Did you?
Cracks. It was made out of that old Carl lumber that they give you that sawmill at Fullerton or Craven. They'd give you that lumber, and we built it out of there.
Did you have indoor plumbing?
Huh?
Did you have indoor plumbing?
No.
Water? No?
No, nothing. It was an outhouse. We called it outhouse.
Yeah.
I gave the guy the letter I got from retirement where I'm retired from. He told about everything, how everything had changed, and he said to move the outhouse inside.
Yeah, I'm glad they did. What about electricity? Any of that?
Oh, no electricity.
Would you?
We didn't have no electricity till I come back in '45 from overseas.
Is that right?
That's right. REA hadn't got down through them sticks.
Man.
Me and her bought a house, and we lived 1,000 yards from the TV, from the REA line, and it cost us $2,000 to get that put in. $2,000 looked like a boxcar then.
Yeah, that was a lot of
Back
money.
in even '45.
That was a lot of money back then.
Yeah.
It sure was. Yeah. Now, was Gravel Hill a high school or an elementary
It's a
school?
grade school.
Grade school?
I'm next to Truman. You know, Truman just had a high school education. I got to the 7th grade.
Is that right? Yeah. And then you bailed out, huh?
Yeah, they opened up a school about 6 miles from there. Well, all we had in mind was to get to work and make some money, you know. And that's what I thought I had to do. So I went to work.
Where'd you work?
I worked for Austin and Knight Company of peeling piling.
Austin and Knight?
Austin and Knight, Elizabeth, Louisiana. And we'd go wherever they sent us. We'd go down to Orange, Texas, and peel that old river rat, we called him. He'd carry us up that river, Sabine River. And we go up there and peel them 125-foot piling out of cypress. And you know how you peeled them?
No.
You just start them on the end and catch that over you, and the water was about that deep. And you'd pull that on your shoulder to the other end, you peel that. You got 2 cents a foot.
So it's like you're peeling the bark off? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
that's
talking
what
about?
it is, peeling the bark off.
What did they use the bark for?
They didn't use it for nothing. They was just getting the pollen, you know. That was
okay.
when there's building on them telephone poles.
Okay, I see.
And
Just to get rid of
then high line started, and all that. Why, that's when they started. That's when they started.
So you were doing that from the time you were, what, 15?
Yeah.
Really? How long did that last?
Well, till about 15. No, I guess I was about 17 or 18 when that was happening. Then we'd go down to South Louisiana. Another historical thing was that he sent us up to Gibson, where Clyde and Barr and Bonnie Parker was laywayed there.
Yeah.
Well, we was living in a tent out there, just out of Gibson. And we went out to work that morning, and the law stopped us and turned us back, and then we didn't know what was happening, you know. But they had that spot set up. Me and Carl carried me back out there yesterday and showed me where. I said, well, that kind of looks like the place a little bit.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's been 61 years ago, I believe he said.
Did you find out when they did get them? Did you hear about it?
Yeah, we heard about it after it was all over, you know.
Did you ever see them or see the car?
No, we never. That's what I went out there for, to see the car, and they said he took it back to Kansas City.
You did see him the night before at the Roadhouse.
Huh?
Tell him about the Roadhouse.
Oh, yeah, they come up there. Did I ever see him? Yeah. Yeah, he come up there, him and Bonnie come in there that night, and at the road, they called them roadhouses then. And we was in that roadhouse.
What's a roadhouse?
That was like a bar down the side of the road, you know, I guess.
Okay.
And they called them roadhouses. And this, Bonnie and Clyde come in there that night. I guess it's the only way down to Natchitoches Parish. And they set them all up. Said everybody's on, it's all on the house, you know. We all drank a beer off of him. He left out. He was just friendly. He was just another guy we thought passing by. We didn't know him.
You didn't know who he was at that time?
No, didn't know who it was at that time.
Isn't that something? Wow. You're kind of notorious, Willie. Okay, let me see. So after you took care of Bonnie and Clyde, what happened to you? Where'd you go after that? Say about 18, 19?
Well, 18, 19, I went to Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas, Company I, the 23rd Infantry.
How did you happen to join the Army?
Well, I tell you, really joined the Army to get something to eat. Some of them old boys got down there and said they joined it because their father joined it or somebody else. I said, well, I come down here for something to eat.
Is that right, really?
Yeah, it was pretty rough in 35. You know, Roosevelt had just went in and he just beat Hoover. And before that, we called it chasing the Hoover hogs, you know. Had an old dog, you know, tell old Rowdy his dinner's on the other end of the line. We get us about 3 or 4 of them swamp rabbits, you know. Barbecue.
Well, okay, you're going to have to tell me what a swamp rabbit is.
Huh?
What's a swamp rabbit?
Swamp rabbit? Oh, he's a
I'm a city slicker.
he's a big old rabbit. You've seen these pet rabbits, hadn't you? He's about the size of a pet rabbit.
Oh, okay. Big one.
And he lived off of the fat of the land, you know.
Okay.
And we'd barbecue them, and that's what we called it. We'd call him, in that old dog, we'd tell him, your dinner's on the other end of the line.
So So you joined up in 1935?
1935, June 19th, 1935.
What'd you do in Fort, where was the first place they sent you?
The first place they sent me?
Yeah.
Well, that was Fort Sam.
That was it?
Houston, yeah.
Okay.
That's the first place, yeah.
Okay. What'd you do there?
We drilled, extended order drill and close order drill. 8 hours a day, pull guard, and KP, and I'll tell you what they had then. That was they had 2 old Liberty trucks with solid wheels, and the rest of it was all mule teams. And we hiked 30 miles to Camp Bullis and fired on the range. And we walked out there and back, hiked out there and back.
In one day?
Yeah. And never will forget. Well, no, it wasn't one day. No, we stayed out there. We stayed out there for a month. You know,
Okay.
2 or 3 months. Always firing on the range.
Okay.
Remember when the Dodge trucks, I made that PID maneuvers in Texas. Old General Overshine was on there.
PID?
Yeah, yeah. And we come out there, they got them Dodge trucks in, we was marching back. We was on maneuver, and we was over at LBJ's town over there.
Johnson
And
City?
it come up one of them Texas Northern, that barbed wire fence blowed down between Amarillo and San Antonio. And we got wet, and they picked us up in them trucks and hauled us back. That's the first time we'd had a ride. We'd hike everywhere we go. And that's the first time I had to ride. That's when they started motorizing the division, 1937.
Wow.
And we rode back to San Antonio, and we were stiff as a poker when we got back there. They had to slide us off of that truck. Put us in there in the shower and warm us up.
Well, did they feed you any good?
Huh?
Did they feed you?
Oh, yeah, man, I'm telling you, that was a life of Raleigh, the meats.
Was it?
They were only time, you know, when we laid around, they'd have that slum, and we'd get tired of it. You called it slum.
What
for
is
supper?
I'm afraid to ask what slum is. What is slum?
Well, it's kind of what we call a beef stew.
Oh, okay.
But you know, after you get full, well, you don't you don't much care about it. If you're not, they kept you where you pretty well eat it there, and you know, it kept you exercise.
Yeah.
We'd make night maneuvers and all that, you know.
When you were on the firing range, what kind of weapon were you shooting?
I was shooting in Springfield 30 caliber rifle.
Okay. Okay.
We speed on the 100, 200, and 300 yard range.
Were you an infantryman?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was number 4. Carried the Browning automatic. That's what Clyde and Bonnie had over there.
Is that right?
Yeah, they had 3 Browning automatics in that car that night they got shot up, you know.
Couldn't get to him, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, what else did you do at Fort Sam Houston?
Well, we pulled guard, and I took a course in machine guns, 50 caliber machine guns. We had 50 caliber.
Did you really?
Took a course. We put that 50 caliber in one of them Dodge trucks and went to Fort Ringo down in Florida. That was a remount for the cavalry down there. And we put it in there, and that's what they call motorizing the army, you know. And it's firing that machine gun out of the back end of that old Dodge truck, you know.
Did we have any tanks at that time?
Huh?
Did the Army have any tanks at that time?
Yeah, they had a few tanks, but there wasn't no tank company down there where we was at.
I see.
They had the old M4A3 and all that they went across Europe with. You know, they had them little tanks in World War I.
Oh, that's right. They had the little
bitty ones.
That's right, the little ones. Yeah. Yeah, okay.
But we go down to Fort Ringshore and stop down there where that missile deal is at El Paso. And we went down there. You had to eat that sand, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You go down there, it wasn't nothing. That sand, man, they got you ready for everything.
That's pretty rough out there.
Everything but the jungles, you know. And I got over in the Air Force and went out to Randolph Field, my second enlistment. And they pulled us out of there in '39. Back to passenger training there, and we went to Marchfield, California.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there to McCord Field, Washington, and billed us out for Alaska. And I got over to McCord Field, and I said, well, I believe I'll just cop out here. I'm going to go up there and freeze to death. You know, I said, I don't like it. They tell me it's 6 months a night and 6 months a day up there. Mm-hmm. I told the old major, and he said, well, I don't believe you can get this short discharge, but he said, I'll put you in for one. And he put me in for one. We got to finally come back, and I come back by Craven in '39. I went to the Philippines.
Well, how long did you stay in the Army before you switched to the Air Force?
It was about 9 years, I guess.
Well, I mean, before you switched to the Air Force.
What you say?
Before you switched over to the Air Force, you were in the infantry. How long did you stay there?
Well, let's see. I went in '38, and I got out in '45. But I got out in '41 in the Philippines. That's a little catch there. They were supposed to. I went to work in the air depot. I seen an old major down there, and a master sergeant that I'd trained at the Lank Trainer at Randolph Field. I had a 52nd School Squadron there. And they said, why don't you come on down to the depot and take a discharge? And I said, well, that was October 10th, 1941, just before the war. And I said, well, if I get a chance, I'll get out of here. I don't like this tropics anyway. And when it come along, well, they're supposed to give me a discharge. It would leave on mine, but I'd get credit for the prior service that I'd done, and then I'd get, you couldn't buy out and sell out and get out in no way. They wouldn't let you out. There's drafting, you see. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't tell me. So when that Japs about December the 7th, well, they moved in there right about December the 20th, they got in where we was at. MacArthur declared Manila open city, and we marched off to Bataan. But I went up there and come over the radio, shortwave radio, said everybody been in service would go back in uniform. And I went up to the adjutant and I said, I want to get back in. I said, I'm not going to stay here. I said, I understand MacArthur's declaring Manila open city, and we'd march off to Bataan, and the Japs would come in from the south, you see. That was the north. And he said, well, I can't swear you in. I said, oh, no, don't come here with that. He said, yeah, he said, I got orders that can't take no. I said, well, they said over this morning over the radio that any man been in uniform would have to go back in right immediately, you know. Well, I said, well, what do you think I'm going to do? I said, I'm not going to sit here in mercy of them Japs and get hung. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, he said, all I can tell you is just go down and get a uniform and get your gears and a gun. Well, we didn't have nothing but a 45, and they didn't even have one of them to give you. And he said, go along with them. So I went down and I got me a uniform and I geared up and I got on MacArthur's train. I told him he left out a Manila, and he was in one of them old wooden carryalls, 1937 wooden carryalls in the motorized army. It was a wooden carryall, and I said I had a wooden gun. Didn't even have a wooden gun. And we marched off towards Bataan, you know.
So you weren't actually in the Army then?
Huh? No, I wasn't actually in the Army, no.
They discharged you over in Manila? Where were you discharged over there?
Down at Port Erie. I got the discharge. Old Major English signed the papers. I was discharged in the Philippines, you see. Well, when I got back here, why, they didn't want to recognize none of that, you see.
Okay.
So they wanted to draft me in the Army. And I told old Boudreaux up there in Leesville, I said, you just call the president. I said, he's on duty for 24 hours a day. He's like me, like I was.
Yeah. Well, tell me about joining up with MacArthur's crowd. What happened to you there?
What happened up that way?
Yeah.
Well, we went, we got into Bataan, and the Japs was moving up. He said, I was in the 19th Air Base Squadron, and he said, take them trucks and go back down and get a load of supplies from Port Erie. They just declared Port Erie open deal, and the finance, money, and all.
What was
and
the
then Filipinos carted that away. Port Erie was down at the docks.
Port Erie.
In Manila, yeah.
Okay.
And they just carted that money and that all out of our finance, you know. Me and an old boy, we was living not too far from there before we got up to Bataan. We got us $3 million, and we carried it down there and cosmolined it down, put 2 shotguns and a 245 sawed-off shotgun and 245 pistols. We said, oh, they'll be back in 3 months. They'll take us back, you know. Or they'll be here in 3 months. We had help on the way because we were putting together all them planes and everything down in the depot. And we got to Bataan. They sent me back down there. And when I got back to up there to the line, why, the Japs had moved in and cut them off. I blowed up my convoy, and I slipped back across the line over on our side. And I stayed with them till Wainwright called us all together that morning. He said, well, he's going to call the president. Said, we're going to have to surrender. Said, we ought to quinine, we ought to bullet. And they'd fired them old guns to the barrels had been down, them 14-inch guns. Shells, you had to change them every 12 rounds, and they'd changed all them out. And we didn't have nothing, but I guess the hour after he surrendered, why, he told Roosevelt, he said just what he had and what he couldn't do. And he said, well, that's the best thing, to surrender.
Were you out of food?
MacArthur was done gone to Australia.
Yeah, he took
We
off.
put him on a boat, and he was going to Australia.
Were you out of food?
Huh?
Were you out of food?
Oh yeah, we was out of food and out of ammunition. That old ammunition laid out there in them tropics, and part of it wouldn't fire anyway. Man, we was in a predicament without them Japs coming in. See, it laid out there in them tropics, and it got wet and damp, and it wouldn't fire. They had them 14-inch guns, was disappearing guns over on Craigador, but they didn't last. When you used all the barrels off of them, that shell would just drop on down in there. So they turned that. So Wainwright called them, and that's what started the march. When he called Roosevelt, told him that's all to do, well, he had to surrender to old General Homer, Japanese. And we all got in that line. We said, well, if we'd have known this, we'd have just let them went ahead and they killed us to start with.
Was that bad? It was that bad? What, you going to say something?
I was asking General who?
General Wainwright.
No, he said Horner or something like that.
Oh, General Homer. Yeah, that was Japanese. Yeah, he was Japanese.
General Homer was the Japanese?
And General Homer.
Is he the one that accepted the surrender?
Yeah. He's the one that accepted the surrender. Of course, he had his lieutenant generals under him, you know,
Yeah.
lieutenants. And that started us on the way. Well, there wasn't much to take history, and we had the reels of Camry. It was 150 reel Camry, you know, and we had the, what you call it, out of it?
Film.
Film, yeah. And we marched down there in about 3 or 4 days. We'd pass it, they'd halt us, and then they'd search everybody, you know. One Jap on one side and one on the other, and marching column of twos. And one on the other, and coming down the line. But if they ever staggered, something ever happened, boy, we'd pass that over in the other line and then get it by them, you know.
This is the film.
We carried it for about 20 miles, and we got caught on that. And then we made the rest of the way of 75 miles.
What was it like marching along?
I was on the Bataan Death March.
Yeah. What do you remember about it?
Well, what I remember about it?
Yeah.
I remember a lot. they was we lost that film, and I said, well, if I get a chance, I'm gonna get out of here. If I can do like that, they got that film. If I ever stagger somebody, and I'd tell them up the rank, I said, you hold that Japanese up, you know, give him a little something like you might have had something, but he'd search you, and if you didn't have nothing, why, stayed in rank. So the one in the front line, and if it ever got that far apart, so one day I got them about 6 feet apart on the front line and the rear line. One going south and the other was back up north. I just split out of there. That was I made about 40 miles of it. I split out of there.
Just out through the jungle?
Yeah, jungles. Yeah, I got away from them.
No fooling.
And we got out there, and them Filipinos guys, she had a bunch of Filipinos working for me in the air depot. And I run into an old boy that was working for me out there in the air depot, and so he told me, he said, there's a Chinese woman over here that's got a little hospital set up, and said, well, they go along at night and pull the dead, see them, if you fail, why them Japs would bend at you or shoot you and leave you there in a dead pile. They'd pile them out on the side of the road, you know, dead pile. And she'd send back a bamboo stretcher back there, and if she felt anybody was warm, they'd pull them out and take them back to this little hospital she had set up there, and she had medical drug and stuff, you know, and had a doctors in there. And that's what we done the rest of the way on down to Manila. We picked up them warm bodies and took them back and got them treated, you know. Of course, we didn't know who they was or nothing, but I come back, well, that won't jive the story in now. But anyway, went on to Manila, and I got down there, and they said, well, we got back to where I lived, and they had a Filipino. He was running. He was driving her old 38 Buick. I asked him what was going on down at Manila Hotel. He said, well, they'd put out an order, said anybody they caught was going to shoot them on spot right there. He wasn't going to give them no chance to go to a prison camp. Well, I guess I ought to let them shot me on the spot. Wouldn't have went through all that misery. And that old boy was driving that Buick, and he said, well, I said, oh, we're into it. We don't know how we're going to get out of here. He's Filipino. And he said, well, he said, I'll tell you, he said, they got a bunch of prisoners down there in that room down there, the big, what you call it, that big room, you know. And he said, the Japs has got about 15 or 20 in there, and they're going to take them out a few days. And he said, you can get in there. So we went out there and took the back out of that old Buick and got over in the turtle hull, and in between the back seat and that, we got in by the guard on the gate. We got out and went in there, and he carried us into where the room was, and he said, I'll signal you when that Jap goes to sleep. See, them old Japs couldn't stand that tropics either. They'd go to sleep, when they're on guard. He's sitting there in the door with that gun like that. So me and old George Ruthier, he's from Canada, we just went by that guard. He signaled us down there, that Filipino did, and we went in there, and next morning that Jap got up and he gonna have his roll call, and he had too many. We like to run him up the wall. And he finally harassed us, and took us out and questioned us. Finally boiled down to who he was. We said, we've been here all the time. You just haven't been calling our name.
You didn't buy it, though?
Yeah. Of course, he had an interpreter there, And finally, he gave up on us, and when they moved out, they moved us out to Santa Tomas. That was a place where they took all civilian internees. I guess that was where it's supposed to be anyway. We stayed there 18 months, and Filipinos throwed food over the fence, and we jumped over the fence, and I seen the picture of that book I have out there that they put 3 barbed wires up into that 8 feet concrete, that 8 feet concrete wall all around it. It was a college, Santa Tomas College, And they had a lot of ROTC for them Filipinos left in there, and we done a lot of training, a lot of.
Did you really?
Yeah, and then we had everything in there from on the Ally side. We had A.D. Calhoun out of the National City Bank of New York. He taught banking, and then they had women and children in there, and they sent all them kids to school. We set up a school in there. And you had bankers, lawyers, doctors, and everything.
So they weren't just
from the Ally side, and Britain had them there. They had Britain and England and France, and they had all on the Ally side was interned in there.
These weren't just soldiers; these were civilians also.
Yeah, we were civilians. We wasn't no soldiers there. That wasn't a soldier deal.
Okay.
And they got to where they got so many in there till all the men, we was 19 of us out of the air depot, was in there, and we was all single. There wasn't none of us married, and the women and children coming in there, they had to have space, so they said, Kanishi said, send them down to Los Banos. That was Ag College, there at Los Banos. And we got down there, we thought we'd done pretty good. And they'd sent several of them nurses down from Bataan, and they sent them down with us. And old Dr. Nance, he was been getting mining company, they sent him down with us. And they put us in one of them little cattle cars, and it was hot in that tropics, about 110, and they opened the door about that much. But when we got down that load, we was still able then to jump up in the car, but we tried to help them nurses up in there, and them Japs wouldn't let you. They wouldn't let you help them, They had to get up in that car. And we was just about smothered to death. We had to go 30 miles below Manila in that little old J car.
How many in the car?
40.
Wow.
40 in the car. Just couldn't turn around,
Any water?
Yeah.
No
water. 30 miles, no water. That's what they do on the Death March Bataan. They give you water, they wouldn't give you nothing to eat. And then they give a break. Well, if you get a tan, if you broke out to get out in a mud hole or something and drink, they'd shoot you.
Why do you think they didn't let you have any water?
Well, I tell you what. our chaplain wrote a book. It's a book out on it, Days of English and Days of Joy. And him and Billy Keith, the missionary to Japan before the war, they tried to figure out the psychology of the Japanese. And they said after they wrote the book, they never did find out. Preston Taylor took Billy Keith back over the 75 miles that they marched. Of course, I didn't make it all. And they said they tried to figure out why they'd do. They'd put him. He was a chaplain. He was a captain, and he'd talk up to them Japanese, and he'd tell them. So one day they got him for something. Yeah, he said he was talking too much, and they put him out and made a box. You never did see a hot box, they called it, did you? Well, you can't sit down, you can't stand up, no, you can't lay down. And they left him there 2 weeks out in that hot sun. And you just had to sit up there and like that, where you couldn't get off your feet, because you had nothing to hang on to. And then you couldn't sit down, and you couldn't get up, and you couldn't straighten up, And that old Kanishi would go by there every morning, and he'd ask old Preston, said, "How you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm doing good by the grace of God." He said, "I'll be here." So one day 2 weeks, he was still there, and they shoved him a bowl of rice in there in a little water, and he said one day when he got out, that Jap turned around and said, "Come on over," said, "I want you to have some green tea with us." He's the commander, and he told him right there, he said, well, at that tea party, he said, listen, said, "You Japs is tough as an oak, but said, you're not as tough as Americans." He said, "We're like a bamboo tree." Said, "You can break an oak, but you can't break a bamboo tree." Said, "It'll lay down on a 90-mile typhoon and it'll raise back up, And he said, "That's what we'll do. We'll raise back up, And he made that and went on to Manchester and come back and taught 40 years at Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth.
Good night. That's one.
He just died a few 2 or 3 years ago. I got a letter from his wife.
And what was his name again?
Preston Taylor.
Preston Taylor.
First chaplain, was made general in the chaplaincy of the United States Army.
Sounds like he deserved it.
Yeah, Kennedy called him to Washington, D.C. and made him chief of chaplains. He went all over the Army area, He was chief.
I see.
He come through DeRidder and spoke one time.
Did he?
When he got through speaking, there wasn't a dry tear in that house.
How bad?
He could tell it like it was.
Yeah. Jeez. Okay, well, where do we leave you off? You're at you and 19 guys. Where did you all go? You were with 19 other men.
19, yeah. No, I was 29 then.
No, you said you were with a group of 19 men in Santo Tomas. Tomas.
T-O-M-A-S.
Santa Tomas, yeah.
Tomas, okay.
I was there 18 months, and they carried us out to Los Baños.
Las Vegas.
I told a woman, we had a pretty good time in there. We said it was tomcat soup at Santa Tomas, and up there you could get a dog.
Is that right? You're living high.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, old Dr. Nance was a doctor up there, and one morning, me and him would go down to the kitchen about 3 o'clock, and we went down to the kitchen, past an old German Shepherd there, and it was pretty fat, and he said, "That dog looks pretty good." He said, "Looked like we could eat him, He said, "I'll tell you what," and he had some kind of little instrument, and he cut his jugular vein and told me, he said, "Willie, go out there and dress that thing." He said, "You ever dress anything?" I said, "I used to dress a hog and a cow." So I went out there and dressed that old dog, and I didn't get no hair on his skin, you know. He put it up on the bullboard, and they cooked it. He sent it down to the kitchen, and they cooked it, and he said, "Put a little salt on it and eat it." But the real story was there when they was bringing in more all them women and everything. A woman brought in a little poodle, and it was pretty and fat, and the old boy walked by there, and he was hungry, and he said, his eyes got big, and he said, "Lady," said, "you better hide that little dog. Somebody will eat him." She said, "Oh, no, no, no." So finally it come up that she had to get rid of her little dog. And so this old ag man was there, the veterinary, he was there, and she told him, said, "Take that little dog down and put him to sleep." Dr. Nance told him, said, "Look, you think we got 7 people dying a day in here?" He said, "You think we're gonna put that dog down?" He said, "No way." He said, "We're gonna eat that dog." And he said, "Well," he said, "this woman don't want that dog, don't want to eat, she won't put to sleep." He said, "We can't put it to sleep, no, no." And this woman was all there, and she was watching it, and she told this vet, said, "Go get some arsenic." She had some old arsenic there that he had left, and he told me, said, "Skin that little dog." Skin it, and this woman had got him, and he'd put that arson on there. So they got in a fight and broke Dr. Nance's glasses, and he couldn't operate no more.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Jeez.
It was, I think in that title in that book out there, it's Singing in the Rain.
What were the Japanese feeding you at that time?
Feeding you?
Yeah.
Well, the Filipinos would push a little old cart in there, and there was lots of, you know, you could live off the fat of land out there. They had papayas and cassava root that they eat, and then you had papayas, mangoes, bananas, coconuts, and you know that coconut was milk, I believe, is what, 4%? I believe it is, and but that coconut was 3. It was near the cow's milk, you know, and that's what keep her bones from breaking, you know. And they'd get all that out there, and you know, and it done pretty good for a while, but he'd cut them Filipinos off. They wouldn't allow them to push that food up there, and they were buying it, the Japs, you see, and they'd turn them back at the gate. If somebody done something in the camp, well, they'd turn that food back, and nobody wouldn't get nothing, you know.
They wouldn't feed you anything.
Yeah. So it just rocked on. It got worse, you know. And well, it got worse and worse and worse. Well, when the planes started coming in, when they started coming back, why, they opened up the bodega one night. I woke up and I heard the national anthem playing out there, and I heard the God Bless America, and I don't know, all them late people had come in and brought this in with them, you see. And them Japs was gone, but they told the committee, said, don't none of them go outside, because he said them troops will be moving through here. Well, of course, naturally, everybody was starving, and they just went outside. So they come back in about 7 nights. They come back and threw the ironclad guard around there and shot everything was outside, and everything was going outside, you know. Well, I told old Bob Coggeshell from Hollywood, I said, "Look, I'm going to stay in here. I've stayed this long." And that was about February. That was getting close to February the 23rd when they freed us, you know. I said, I'm going to stay here and tough it out that night. So we stayed there, but it went on. It was a lot of things went on.
But you could have left if you'd wanted to?
Huh?
Are you saying that you could have left if you'd wanted to? I don't understand.
They were going outside their buildings, I think, isn't that right?
Oh, no, we'd have a roll call, and then they'd check it. They'd liable to call us out at 12 o'clock and have a roll call.
Okay, not outside the camp, but outside the
He's
building.
talking about outside, not outside the compound, but
Okay.
outside their buildings. They told them to stay.
Oh, yeah, we had guys going out. They'd shoot everybody was in a cubicle. They had 6 in a cubicle, and if 2 of them escaped or 1 of them escaped, well, they'd shoot the other 5, you know. And old Rivers was from Pan American Airlines, and we got familiar with him because we was in the air depot. And old Edwards, and they'd go out. So they went over, and who got in contact with old General Swing, and they give him how the Japs was how far the barracks was apart, how many barracks, and the whole outline of the whole thing. Japs would be having calisthenic at 7 o'clock, and the guards, when they'd be eating breakfast, and the arms would all be in the rack at the time they was eating breakfast and falling out for calisthenics. So that's when they called them. So they give them all of that. And the Filipinos was around there all the time, you know. Them Japs would go down there and they'd walking these sentries, walking feet and back and facing one another, you know. And them Filipinos was good with the bolo. They could throw one as far as from here to that corner yonder. And you'd see down there, we'd go down the gate trying to sweat out something to eat. You see them Jap guards marking. I was down there one day and I seen something coming through there and it hit that Jap right on the throat. They hit him right on the throat, cut his throat, and he fell with his rifle. That Filipino was gone.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Did it kill the guard?
Yeah, it killed him. It one of them bolos about that long. He'd throw that thing just like he'd go crossing and it hit him right on the throat. Then they'd practice.
Tell them how y'all cooked your rice and made your coffee.
Oh, well, that's right at the end now, yeah.
I thought you was at the end.
Yeah, me and old Bob was sitting there that morning and we said, I'd been telling old Bob, I said, listen, I hear them planes had been flying over, reconnaissance had been flying over. And I said, I can tell that's a drone with them old radial engines. That's our planes, you know. And we was sitting there that morning about the time they got ready to come in, but we didn't know that was something going to happen. And old Edwards has been going out in Rivers and meeting General Swain. They had it all plotted up. They told us there at the reunion. I went back to one reunion night about 4 years ago. And old General Swain was there, and he told us, he said, you people know you got out that morning, but you don't know how you got out. So he told us all about it, how he done it. And there was 150 paratroopers volunteered, and he borrowed the planes and tanks to come in there to get us. He didn't have it in his unit. And they never lost a man out of the internees or the paratroopers either. So it was quite a coincidence. So me and old Bob was sitting there that morning. We got up about daylight and we had the Filipinos throw us over some cornmeal. And I said to old Bob, I said, well, let's cook this meal. Let's parch this corn and we'll drink some coffee. And then we'll eat the meal. But that was a breakfast we never did get to eat. About that time I heard the roar of them planes and I looked up and they'd throw that smog over the top of them, underneath them, and they were dropping through it. But we didn't know it. And I seen one come by and said, "You rescue." He had yellow letters said rescue.
Really?
Yeah. And I said, "Bob, that's him. Bob, that's him." So we, about that time, the old saying, hell broke loose in Georgia, and that began to fire. They was taking them Japanese, you know. They'd come in there and they'd dropped. And
These are paratroopers that.
Huh?
These are paratroopers. Okay.
yeah, that was paratroopers.
Okay.
Yeah, they dropped. And then before we got up to the main gate, they said, "Oh man," and one popped through. A doughboy popped through the head of that door of that barracks, and he said, "Get what you got. Get enough to do you 3 days, and let's go." And I said, "Let's go." We ain't got nothing.
3 days. Yeah.
I didn't have nothing. I just left out there my clothes and all that I had on. I didn't look back, but you know, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of them people, they had to go back down there and try to get them out of there. They were going to burn all them old Nipa barracks, you know, behind them. And they had to go down there and beg some of them people out there. They'd been there so long till they didn't know what to do. There was like some of them that walked out over them Jap guards before. They'd go out, and when they went off their rockers, why, they'd go down and say, "I'm going to catch that old boat I come over here on the old AD Cran." If there was a sailor, why, they'd say, "I'm going to catch a gold star, I'm leaving."
Mm-hmm.
You know, they walk right over that Jap guard, and they knew he was going to shoot them.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what I told them. I said, I watch this court here in the United States, and I said, they try a lot of them people and turn them loose for insanity. I said, "You never seen one of them guys try to kill nobody." I said, "He was ready to go. He was ready to go home, and he was going to catch a boat he was coming over on," you know. And I said, that this court here makes me sick about that a fella kill somebody, do something, you know. Like me, I said, well, if I ever get caught with them Japs, well, I said, I'll pull my 45 out and shoot myself. I'll not be tucked, but I did. I did 3.5 years under them.
3.5 years.
I did all that, but I didn't commit suicide.
Yeah.
Huh?
So you were under him for 3.5 years.
3.5.
3.5. How many people were in it? Was Los Banos? How many people were in it when they rescued you?
2,100.
No fooling.
2,100.
Wow, that's a bunch. Where'd you go?
What?
Where did you go?
Where'd we go? Oh, we went, they got us down the main gate, and they said, all that can walk, we got about 3 miles down to the beach. And they come up there with 21 alligators and tanks, and they had about 700 in there that couldn't walk, was in the hospital. And well, a woman had just had a baby about 3 hours before they got there. And you know how it was going. It was, we got down there and they said, all of you can walk. So I told them, I seen the time, I couldn't walk a block down there, but I walked that 3 miles in high spirit.
Did you?
Yeah. And they got all them alligators and ducks, and we went down to the beach, and we was laying there, and they had them little L-17s was coming across there, spotting them Japanese, and they had the artillery was sitting up on top of the hill from where we was at, down at the beach. And they opened fire, but they cut them out pretty quick, you know. And then we stayed down there all day, and they could only carry part of us over on one load. They had to go 15 miles across that Laguna de Bay, there just out of Cavite Navy Yard. And we got out there and waited, and I was the last man getting on, and we was laying there on the beach waiting. They got back just about dark. And just about dark when them Japs opened fire along there, and just as we all got loaded, and I was on the last one, I just jumped to the bottom of that tank, and I said, I'll just come down here, and you could hear that going on, and They were hitting, but we didn't lose nobody. And we pulled on out and finally got away. They got to that island. We had an infantry deal with them Amtraks was up there waiting for them Japs, you know. And of course, it'd take you 3-4 hours to tell you what all the story that they told us, you know, about how they took us. And we got back to Billy Prison that night at 12 o'clock, and they said, well, meantime, before that, we was marching down there. Why, they wouldn't give us nothing to eat because they said they'd killed a bunch of prisoners at Billy and them other prison camps was in there. And they said, all we can give you, them Filipinos would climb them coconut palms and they'd cut the top of that coconut and drink that water out of there, and that's the water we got. And
but why wouldn't they feed you?
No.
Why not?
Well, they said they killed a bunch of them by giving them something to eat.
Okay, I see.
There's a lot of them. I mean, you ought to see the pictures of some of them. I weighed 118 pounds, and I weighed 185 when I went in there. And
He worked in the kitchen.
you couldn't. My fingers right here. You couldn't. It seemed like my fingers went right on up to my wrist. There wasn't no meat on there at all.
Peggy says you worked in the kitchen.
Huh?
Peggy says you worked in the kitchen.
Yeah.
What did you do in the kitchen? Everything? Did you cook?
Well, all there was to cooking. Yeah, I was a cook. And all you do is take a paddle and a 60-gallon cow and a gallon of rice, and you'd stir it till it blowed up to where you feed 60 men. Feed 60 men out of it. And the best part about it was that old rice that we had to tote them rubber trees in and fire that up, and they made a concrete pit and set them old 60-gallon cows. You've probably seen them in the Army. And they'd set them up there and they'd boil that rice or cornmeal or whatever they could get. And that's what we had. So I'd work in one time in the Jap kitchen over there. They had a kitchen over there, you know, and they'd send us down there on a detail. And old Gallinger from New York, he was an engineer. He told me, he said, "Can you get some of them duck eggs down there?" And he said, "I'll tell you how, we got a ice box." I said, "We ain't got no ice box, but I'll tell you how we can keep them." And I said, "How?" He said, "They issued us a gallon." That back when they issued salt, like one of them gallon cans, about a 3-gallon can, and full of salt, you know. And that's the salt they give us to put on whatever we get a hold of to eat. And I got them eggs, and he'd put them eggs down that salt, and that salt would seal the pore on that egg.
Yeah.
And it'd keep just like it was in an ice box.
Is that right?
And
Pretty smart.
he said, "Well," I said, "how are we going to eat them now? You see, there's so many people in there. If somebody seen you eating something, well, they love to grab it out of your hand." I said, "We stole the egg now," but I said, "how are we going to steal away to eat them?" Well, we get out on the lawn at night, you know, and that moon would be shining just about as bright as day, and lay out there on that lawn. So me and him would sit there and we'd peel these eggs, the hull off of them, and we'd take a bite, but we'd be looking away from somebody else where they couldn't see us. And I guess that's the reason we survived. We got to fit them. I'd bring them eggs out of the kitchen, and he'd put them in his little ice box, and we'd cook them as we get a chance. You know, you couldn't, if you had anything cooking, you give you a little old adobe stove, and there's coconuts, and you had to fan it and get up the pressure, and you get the water while you could boil that egg, you know. And ball them up, and it's something else. But going on down on the march out of there, we passed this Filipino, and they was up in the tree, and they had these Jap scalps hanging up there, and they had a stalk of bananas, and they had a coconut, and everything grew native mangoes painted in there. And we'd march by there while they'd say, "Which one do you want, sir?" He said, he pointed a Jap head or a banana or a coconut.
A souvenir, huh? Wow.
Yeah. Well, of course, we'd take a coconut or a banana.
Were any of the Japanese guards, any of them kind to you at all?
What?
Were any of the Japanese guards kind to you?
Oh, yeah. Some of them, you'd talk to them, and they was like, he'd tell them about they'd been in San Francisco, Tojo and MacArthur went to West Point together, huh? And they'd talk to you about San Francisco, and they'd tell you about what they were going to do when they got to San Francisco, and all that. And I said, well, I hope you get there. If you get there, they'll treat you good.
Did any of them try to help you?
Well, not many of them. They were scared to see if their commander, they were inhuman to themselves. That's the reason you couldn't figure out their psychology. You see, they were inhuman to themselves. They'd put a little old guard on duty, and he dug that sword behind him, and he may be 4 feet tall, and he drug that sword on the ground behind him, and they put him on guard, and he had his gun too, you didn't think he was a general or a lieutenant or a captain.
Yeah.
And they'd put him on there, and I'd hear that when we was at Santa Tomas, I'd hear that old and shoes hitting that concrete, and it was hard. He'd come up there, and I'd be standing at the door of the university there. You could look out, and I'd throw something over there trying to wake that little old soldier up. I knew what he was going to do when he got there. When he got there, he took that sword off that little old soldier, and he court-martialed him right there. He whipped him with that sword and left him on duty another 6 hours. Huh?
For sleeping?
For sleeping, yeah. Of course, if we caught one man asleep, we took him in, and he had to see the old man, and he go over to the major, the battalion commander, and get a penalty of whatever he was going to get,
Yeah.
We was another time lined up there, old MacArthur left his car with Fernandez, that Filipino, the one his wife had so many shoes.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that, don't you?
Yeah. What was her name?
And
Marcos.
Right, Marcos, thank you.
he left his car over there, and one day I was down at the gate, and this car pulled in up there, and somebody told me, said, well, the committee, old A.D. Calhoun, he was chairman of the committee. He was out of the National City Bank in New York, and he was in Manila at that time, got caught in Manila, and he said, they're interviewing a guy that's coming through. Said he come off of the Nimitz, off Langay and Guff, and he come down there and got MacArthur's car from Hernandez, and come down there, and it was at the main gate. And about that time, old Tojo drove up, and he come through the gate, And he's lined up there, and the interpreter's standing there, and he hollered that Jap, oh, and he said, what's doing? He said, wake up, said that interpreter told me, he said, wake up, the general's coming through. And about that time, he went down the line just before he hit that gate, and he backhanded every one of them soldiers and I told that interpreter, I said, well, he get about the second man in our ranks and somebody knock him out. Flute, wouldn't he? And old told you, come on in there. And at that time, while this major was in there interviewing, he was disguised like a Filipino, brought him in there. And he was in there interviewing the Santa Mosque when they'd taken, that was in 44. And he was interviewing
Ferdinand.
the prisoners and getting the distance, the barracks and everything in there, where people were sleeping and all that, you know. And he went out the gate, drove that car off and went back to headquarters. I told him they was talking about all these secrets they have now, and I said, well, the last thing, they give the last thing away. The other day when they give that woman away was CIA, Wilson. When they give them away, I said, that's the last secret we had. And I said, they'd give it away. And I said, them Muslims fixing to whip us over there. You watch and see.
Well,
There'll be Muslims when Bush ain't got no more bombs and nothing.
well, we hope not.
Huh?
Well, we'll hope not. So you guys, they took you to Billabed prison?
Huh?
They took you to Billabed prison?
Billabed.
Is that what you, yeah. That's
Yeah, well, that's where they rotated us to.
Okay, where'd you
When
go
we
after?
come back.
Right, where'd you
Come
go?
across the bay.
Okay, after there, where did you go?
Well, I went right around there, just a little circle in Nichols Field, where I was stationed at. And I got on the plane, a C-53, I believe it was. It made them new. The other old one was 47. And we started out to Lady, to the rotation center down there, and I got up next to I was first known, and I was sitting by the radio operator, and the pilot and co-pilot was sitting over here, and this old radio operator was sitting over there. He said, well, just there, I got a message from Tokyo Rose. And I said to myself, I don't know who Tokyo Rose is. Yeah. Said they're going to blow up Mendor oil dump tonight at 8 o'clock. We got down there while it come up a storm, and we had to land at Mendor. And I said, we went and eat breakfast. They fed us breakfast about 8 o'clock at night. About 9 o'clock, they told me it was coming through that plane. Well, they said that Jap Zero come in there and blowed up that oil dump and went on out.
We couldn't stop him?
Yeah, wasn't nothing to stop.
Jeez.
Well, we got on the next morning. I said, well, I'm getting close. You know, and we got down about 100 miles. The lady was about 600 miles down from Manila. And this pilot, he pulled a stunt. He's going over a little old mountain, and, you know, it wasn't over 300 feet high, you know. But he was flying low. Wasn't no resistance from the Japs on the air. And I was sitting right up next to the pilot in the first seat back. And I looked down, that old tail had done dropped. And I said, oh, here we go again. I said, I'm not going to make it, you know. And I said, because I taught them down there on that length trainer at Randolph Field, and everybody said that, and agreed that there wasn't no way if it lost its flying speed. I was looking at that altimeter when he lost his flying speed, and that tail dropped, and I said, well, I'll never make it. So I just shut my eyes, and when I opened my eyes, why, he was back up level. And when we got off that plane on the Lady down at the beach, why, I looked out to my right, and there come a Japanese Zero right down the other line. You know, there was so many planes coming in and out of there. And them Japs would come in there and gas up, and they'd never, man that gassed them up would probably never pay no attention, you know. He'd go on out. And that pilot said to me when I got off last and getting off, he said, "You don't know how lucky you are." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I seen that." I said, "I'm going to ask you one question." I said, "How did you pull that out of there?" He said, "Well," I said, "they didn't teach us nothing like that." I said, he didn't know what I was in the Air Corps, you know. And I said, we didn't teach them anything like that. And he said, "Well," he said, we got taught when you go into a tailspin, where you can throw that throttle all the way forward and pull it back, and throw it and pull it back again, and you can pull out of that." And I said, "Well, I've learned something," but I said, "I'm fixing to get off and leave you, and I get hit the ground, lady."
So is that when you got on the ship and came home?
Yeah, we got on the USS Admiral Caps, and we went down to Hollandia, to Manus, across the equator, come back up and cross the international date line, went by Hawaii. Well, they stopped us over there and said, "You're going to get a look, but you were not going to get off."
Oh, no.
So the CIA and FBI met us there and went to interviewing us, you know. But I'd been at Hickam Field. I stopped over there. They blowed the cylinder going over the old USAT Grant. And I'd been there, and I said, "Well, look back up on the side of the little old hill there in Hawaii, and there they had them old guns pulled back up there on top of that hill. They'd pulled out of that battle way." And I remembered that morning that I was on patrol on the China coast. They called it reconnaissance then. Now they call it spy planes. And we got a message that the Japanese was having a maneuver on Mount Fujiyama. But at that time they was 1,000 miles off of Honolulu. So that radar was set up out there telling this liaison officer that the pilots was coming, that the planes was coming through and they're going to hit Honolulu. Well, he went back, he said, "No, that's them planes going to Dutch East Indies and Malaysia and over into them places over there, because that's what started the war." But a lot of people don't know yet what started the war was because the Japs was cut off from the oil and rubber. And them rubber plants, and they come out of that chute of bucking. And Roosevelt and them was in conference with the Japanese ambassador from Japan when they hit Pearl Harbor. So they was giving them a spook, you see, they had them spooked, that they were having a maneuver on Hawaii, and that fleet had just pulled in there. We knew where the fleet was and where the aircraft carriers was, and they was between Midway and Hawaii coming in too. But that fleet had been on maneuvers, all the rest of it, in Fort Island, and they had backed all them carriers and everything up there and Fort Island, and they was in row. And then I read a book. I remember you gave me the book, I believe. I read that book where it showed where they was, and then I had a video of it. And them guns was chained down on them battleships, destroyers and carriers and everything. They was sleep. That's the reason they called us a sleeping joint. And everything was asleep.
Where were you when they attacked Pearl Harbor?
When they hit Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, you were in China?
I was on a reconnaissance out there, you know where that plane got shot down there out on China's coast there? We was just on that border there on a patrol. We were listening to all of this that was coming off in Honolulu, you see?
Wow.
But they wasn't, them officers, them liaison officers wasn't believing it could happen. It was just like we was out there when they hit us at Manila. They said, "Oh, them Japs won't do that there." They was telling us, oh, they're slain-eyed and they can't fly and they can't fight and all that. But don't you kid yourself, they had an army that wouldn't quit. They can fight now. Them buddies, they'll fight to the die. They take that little pill, that Harry carry, and they keep a coming. That's what to tell them, that the Harry carry. You know, that's one thing MacArthur done. He changed the Harry carry in Japan. You don't hear no pilot diving nothing into nothing. Huh?
No, not anymore.
What kind of pill did they take?
Huh?
What kind of pill did they take?
Oh, they had some kind of drug they took. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it was.
The kamikaze?
The Benzai. When you was hand-to-hand fighting with them, it was they kind of, when they hollered, boo, Benzai, here they come. They wasn't going to stop. If you could bend at them, or you could shoot them, or you could do anything.
Yeah, I think they were tanked up on something.
Yeah.
But I don't
Amphetamine, doesn't it?
know what. Do you know, Mike, what they were taking?
I think they were taking amphetamine.
Amphetamines, yeah. So you got to Hawaii, and the FBI and the CIA debriefed you in Hawaii?
Well, it's kind of a miracle. We got on, they interviewed us, and all they talked to us about was how was you treated in that prison camp, you know. And we'd tell them, we got the name of them old Kanishi and Homa and all them people. We give them to the FBI. Well, I read that book. How come they're reading this book? It was the kids. I never did. I come back here and I just worked 30 years and never said nothing to nobody and went on my business. And James picked up that youngest boy of mine on the internet, and he picked up this book. And I was reading it. And he wanted me to read it, said to see if it's true. And I said, well, I don't know whether I want to go back to that or not. And so I did, and so I found out that if I'd opened up a long time ago, I'd live longer, huh?
Think so?
Huh?
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Let's
everybody,
get off
that's
your
what
chest.
everybody crammed it in. You know, everybody crammed it in.
Yeah.
Like Tom Brokaw said, everybody crammed it in, never said nothing.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can't talk. I've got an uncle, and I have been trying to get him to, he was on the Merman's run from England to Russia, and he was in the Navy, and if they were sunk, you know, the life was maybe 5 minutes in the North Sea before they would die. And I wanted to do an oral history on him, and he absolutely refuses.
Yeah.
He won't talk.
Yeah, it's pretty unpleasant memories.
When you said that the chaplain could tell how it was, what kinds of things did he tell? How was it?
Oh, Preston Taylor? Oh yeah, he's on that. You got that book, ain't you? I gave it to you, didn't I?
But what kinds of things did you go through that he was telling about? What kinds of things happened that he was telling about at the church?
Oh, them Japs was inhuman. They couldn't tell you. They just liable to treat you good, and then they just all of a sudden liable to bend you. Shoot you. There's no way telling what they're gonna do.
For no reason.
And for no reason. No reason, you're right. Preston went on to Manchuria, and he told the Jap, when I looked at MacArthur, that video, and when that little Japanese secretary crawled up on the battleship Missouri, and MacArthur met him, and they're sitting around there in the house, he was sitting there looking, in that little Jap, he's about 4 foot, dragging a sword, peg-legged, And he told him, he said, well, y'all whipped us in the battlefield, but said, we'll whip you economical. And I thought of it the other day when they owned about 70% of the United States, lending us money now. Huh? And old Preston, that's what he told him. That old general asked him when he run over that Green Tea Party, he said, what would you do if you got to Tokyo? And he said, Preston told him, said, well, if we get to Tokyo, said, we'll not let you Japs eat so much rice, and we'll give you something, and you'll grow tall, and you'll be smart. You think you're smart now, but he said, you'll be smart. And he told old Billy Keith when he went to write that book, he said, now, I don't want you to write that I've got no angry at the Japs. He said, I don't hold anything against them. He said, I told them like it was. He said, sure enough, all that happened, he said, that Jap asked him, said, he asked that Jap, said, what would you do if you got to Washington, D.C.? And he said, well, I'd hang MacArthur on Square. I'd kill all the ministers and preachers and all of that, you know. Well, you see, Preston never told him he'd do anything like that. He just told him what he'd do. They'd do good and treat him good, and that's what Mac did. He didn't even kill Harry Hito, you know.
Yeah, yeah. He did treat him well.
Yeah. I never did understand that, but I found it out. Harry Hito got off of that by saying that he was that his generals took over his command, you know. Them Jap generals took it over, and there wouldn't have been no war if it had been for Harry Hito, and I think that's where MacArthur agreed with him. Reason they let him off the hook.
Yeah.
But one thing, another, and I'm getting close to the end, I guess. Bush went over to that old Emperor's funeral, and he bowed down, and I seen him shoot him because you wouldn't bow down to him. I wouldn't bow down to him. I wouldn't have bowed down to him. I seen them guys on that death march throw up their shoulders and tell them Japs how dirty they was, and you shoot me. They'd throw them old soldiers, you know, we had in there before war. They'd been World War I. And there's just no way I can bow down to one of them. I got saved by the grace of God, but I forgive them and all that, but I just can't bow down to one of them.
Have you ever gone back there?
Huh?
Have you ever gone back to the Philippines after the war?
No, I've had a chance, but I didn't go back. My son-in-law wanted to carry me back over there and go dig up that $3 million, and I said, no, I believe I just buried that there for good.
So after you were at Hawaii, okay, you got back to Hawaii, remember? And then when did you get back to the United States, the mainland?
I landed in San Francisco.
When? Do you remember when?
Yeah, the Pier 20.
No, when?
When? 1945.
Well,
May, let's see, April 1945. And I had a letter from my wife over there. She can vouch this.
yeah?
It wasn't his wife.
I'd promised to marry her in 38 when I got out of the Air Force first time, and I said,
You're running a little late.
I said, come back home, and I got a job. When it paid $1.50 a week. You just got to work 1 day a week. And I said, I can't feed a woman on that. I said, I starved to death.
Yeah.
So I went back in the Air Force. So that's how come that's where I was at.
Okay.
But I had a letter from her, and she said, I'm still waiting for you. And I wrote back, and I told her, I said, if you foolish enough to wait this long, I'll marry you when I get there. And me and her got married 2 days after.
What was your what date did you get married on?
What's your anniversary?
What's your anniversary?
28th of April,
28.
47.
Yeah, it's close to my parents. So you went back into the Air Force after that?
Huh?
You went back into the Air Force?
No, I worked 30 years for civil service, U.S. Civil Service.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
And preached 30 years on the side. Preached 30 years on the side.
Fort Polk? You worked at Fort Polk?
Yeah. I made 10 years at Fort Polk, and I went to TEY to 2 or 3 places. Camp Kruger, Oklahoma, and I was on top of a tank when they dropped the atomic bomb on Japan. I'd already made it back, before the war. And that captain was standing there, and I said, well, I jumped down off that tank, and I said, well, goodbye, I'm gone, I'm quit right now. And I quit there, and I rested for a while. But I rested for about 2 years before I ever went back to work.
Did you? Yeah. Did it take time for you to get your health back? About a couple of years to get strong again?
Yeah, well, I come by Fort Sam Houston and convalesced over to old 2nd Medical Rescue where I was stationed. First time, come by there and rested a while. 2 weeks, I believe. I got home. I began to feel my oats a little.
Yeah. So when did you get out of the Army?
I got out of the Army in 1941.
When did you get out of the Air Force?
Okay, the Air Force then. Out of the
Out
military.
of the Army? Oh, well, I got in the Army in 1938.
Okay, when did you go back into civilian life is what I mean.
Well, I went into civilian life while I was in Manila.
Yeah. He was discharged.
See,
I was working
I
at
discharged to work in the air depots, you see.
But I was trying to find out when
As
you
a
were
civilian,
discharged in
civil
45.
service.
When were you discharged in 45?
He had
Well,
already been discharged.
Oh, okay.
He was a
Okay, that's right. They
civilian.
never.
I was already discharged. When I come back,
Oh, yeah.
they sent us down to Port Area and paid us off
That's right.
$1,000 partial pay, and I come on home.
That's right. Okay. Tried to go back in, and I wouldn't take it.
And then I got my arrears and pay from New York, New Jersey, of all my back pay for civil service, not for Army, you see.
I see.
And then I went back to civil service at Fort Polk and finished out. All total, I was 30 years.
When did you retire from civil service?
1974.
74. All right. What were you doing in civil service? What was your job?
I was
Mechanic.
refrigeration, air conditioning, and worked at the tank shop, tanks, and I worked automobiles. Went to Redstone Arsenal. Went up there and helped put the missiles on before they put the first man in the moon.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Jeez. Cool. All righty. Well, I'm about out of questions. You got any? Mike, do you have any?
There's something I would like to ask. It has to do with
What do you think, Mike?
I messed up.
when
Where'd they have that?
when MacArthur's headquarters was informed of the bombing of Pearl Harbor, did they make any preparations to defend Clark Field?
Clark Field.
When
Yeah, I'll tell you what happened that day. Well, I was in the air depot and me and propeller specialist George Ruthier, this guy was with us, we flew up to Clark Field the evening they come in, and we checked all the gear and the propellers, and we checked everything. They had 37 B-17s that come in there. And them B-17s was all good, and they had flew out, the Japs was coming in that morning. It had come one day and bombed, And they had moved them all off of the ground to keep the Japs from hitting them, you see.
Trying to refuel them.
Yeah, and they come in to have dinner, and it landed, and all of them landed together, I guess, and had dinner, and that's when the Japs hit them.
Well, the reason I was asking, there is a controversy. General Breton says that he had a strike for Formosa. You know, he was going to send the B-17s for Formosa, and General Sutherland, MacArthur's chief of staff, stopped it. And I've just wondered if y'all
Stopped the B-17s on Formosa?
from going to Formosa. And that's why they went up in the air and then came down to refuel. It was caught.
Yeah, well, that's all we knew, that we heard that they went up to escape the Japanese hitting them. We didn't know what it was. But when they come back down and was eating, that's when they hit them.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's how it was. And that was most of the B-17s that the United States Air Force had. And many people believe that that was more of a serious loss than Pearl Harbor, as far as striking power.
Well, they lost Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, yes, sir.
No, I'll tell
He's
you.
saying that when they destroyed the planes, that was as great a loss as the ships in Hawaii.
No, that book that you give me, it read that Hickam Field it told how many P-40s and how many P-38s and B-17s that they had, but they was all asleep at the cog. That's how come they hit Pearl Harbor, because see, that Japanese fleet left Japan, and they told how many days. This a reason I say in this book, he come back here and preached. He's a Presbyterian preacher, the one that led the flight over Hawaii, and that's where he did all the stories. It's just like the stories what we didn't get in the video. Everything we did over there after when MacArthur started back, all of it was videoed, you know, or where you could put it in the video, it was photographed. And then the news media could go in and they'd furnish them, like if they went in here and like we was at Nichols Field, where they furnish you a camera, and just like when they come in there, the picture of the Los Banos, they showed the Chicago Times, showed the pictures there and everything, and it's in them books. And it's in them videos, they showed just where they come, how they done it, and what they done it for, of the prisoners. They showed the Chicago Times and this general sitting there holding a flag, and then it showed where this dropping this food. They dropped it in on Billy Bibb Prison, and it hung up there in a parachute on top of the building, you know. They was dropping food into them prison campers. They never did drop none. They was afraid if they dropped it into us, they'd kill them. Well, they wouldn't allow us to look up at one of them, you know. They wouldn't allow us to look up at one another. And I can't figure out that fleet. Them Japs followed that fleet in, our fleet, and they knew they was asleep. They knew that the old into Pearl Harbor, and that's the reason they hit. And they didn't get no resistance. Them guys was jerking them chains off of them battleships and off of them guns, off of Hickam Field. They were taking them P-50 calibers. We had two synchronized 50 caliber machine guns sitting in that P-40 and P-41, and they pulled them guns out of there and was fighting them before they just playing ring around the roses. Japs was coming off that fleet, going back.
Daddy, at Clark Field, when the B-17s got hit, you said they had gone up and they came back down.
Yeah.
Why did they come back down?
come back down to eat dinner was all we ever heard. Now, we was up there 2 days before that happened, but we didn't. See, we was putting the wings of on P-40s and on all them pursuit planes, that couldn't fly. They shipped them out in a crate, the plane, and then we'd put them rig them, put the wings on them and wig them and put them over there. That's the reason old Jesse Knowles is a senator down here. I was at old General called us out there to Fort Polk, and we went out there meeting, and he was telling about how the Japs played the Ring Around the Roses. You see, they come in and they'd hit Clark Field, come around Cavita Navy Yard and Nichols, Fort McKinley, back around through Manila, and then go back up and hit all of Fort Santiago and back up to the Manila, mouth of Manila Bay, up there where Corregidor was. And they'd go on out, you see. So they'd come back and refuel. I never will forget, I had an old master sergeant there. His name was Phoenix. And old Phoenix, they was coming along there bearing. Me and old George had run out across there. Plane was stranded out across Nichols Field there, and we run out there, and we got he sent us out there to see what was wrong with it. We got out there, and he got up in the cockpit, and I gave him a signal to wind it up, and about that time there come a zero, Jap zero. And old George wound it up, and I gave him a zero sign, and he come out of there, and it was loaded with 1,800 pound of TNT, and we jumped over there, and his engineers was right there on Nichols Field. We'd all moved out several days before and dug in foxholes around there. We stayed in the depot up there waiting for some signal. Well, we was patching up them planes that come in, and something happened to them while we was patching them up and getting them back in the air, And that Jap Zero come back across, and he was strafing the oil drums and everything. He kept strafing this old plane. I went over there and jumped in the hole with a bunch of engineers, about 6 engineers in there. I jumped in the hole with it. But when I woke up after that explosion all went off, I was about 50 feet from it, I guess. And after it went off, well, I woke up about 50 feet the other way, and I didn't know what I was doing. I'd look around. I looked out there, and there's laying around an old engine was still burning on it, and it blowed all that 1,800 pound of TNT on there. But old Phoenix, we had that. We had another old man there. He's second lieutenant. Another second lieutenant there. He'd drive around on that tug, and he'd say, I told him one day, I said, Reed, you're going to get killed. I said, won't you get in the foxhole? Oh, he said, I'd like to see about my men. I said, well, them men will take care of themselves. I said, they'll get in the foxhole. He said, yeah, so he made it through, but old Phoenix was our provost sergeant, and he'd run when I was up in the air base. He'd run out in that bay. They'd come along, them Japs would wing up, and they had no resistance, and they just dropping them bombs, and this old Phoenix, he run out and got up in that bay. We was pretty close to the bay. He just run across the street over there, and he's in the bay, and in Manila Bay. So he got out in there, and they dropped them pilots was like ours. I know they'd drop them bombs to get credit, and they may not be on target, but they dropped them out there, and old Phoenix, that water was going way up high, and he run back in there, and he says, Willie, he said, you know them Japs are shooting you in the water. We got up to Bataan, and they got up there, and I seen a sign when I got up there. Well, when I got back in behind the lines, well, I looked out there, and it said a little sign, and it said, "To Phoenix bathroom, this way. Phoenix mess hall this way." Said, "Watch out." That meant he'd run over you. Oh, I tell you, we laughed at things. We laughed at things. I guess if we hadn't, we'd have died if we had took it serious. I reckon. I don't know.
Well, you about finished?
I'm finished. I'm through. You got time?
When were you in New Orleans in the hospital and the nurses told you about the man upstairs who had been taken out of the dead pile?
Oh yeah, it was a short story. They sent me to the Marine Hospital every year for a checkup. And I got down there, and that nurse told me, said, I didn't know what they was checking me for and everything. And I tell her one day, she said, we got one of them guys, George C. Pearl, said he wrote a book. And he's 3 days in the dead pile on the death march of Bataan. She said, you ought to go up and see him. And I kind of drawed my shoulder then. I didn't much want to go up there. I said, you ought to go up and see him, talk with him. He's in a wheelchair. I said, he's doing pretty good. I went up there and talked with him, but I couldn't recognize him. But that was just a coincidence, you know. Walking down the street, and I seen me and my wife. I told her, I said, I've never been in New Orleans in my life. I said, I've been halfway around the world, I guess. And I said, never been in New Orleans. And went down to see my sister. She was sick. We walked down Bourbon Street. And we was walking down Bourbon Street, and I seen a guy in there. I looked through the window, and there's a guy sitting in there. We called him Sandbad the Sailor. You didn't know who was who when you was in that prison camp, because there was 19 of us wouldn't tell who he was, because afraid the Japs found out we was in the air depot. Well, they'd took us out and hung us, shot us. And old Sandbad, I told him, I said, he come down to me one day, he said, well, I'm going to China. I said, you want to go to China? I said, the Japs are going to send all the people who was resident in China can go. And I said, no. I said, I get up there and all these boxers and shorts on. I said, I'll freeze to death. And I said, I believe I'll turn you down, but I said, I'll ask you to do something for me. I said, when you get back to Louisiana, well, I said, when you get back to States, you call old A. Leonard Allen in Washington, D.C. I said, he's a congressman. And tell him that Willie Perkins is in where it's at Los Banos then. I said, no, it's Santa Tomas. And he said, well, I'll sure do that. And I got back home, my mother showed me the letter and said, did you write this? Did you say this? And you was out there? They wrote, that congressman called her and said, he's someplace in the undesignated area in the Philippine Islands, you know. But that way she knowed that I was alive, you see. Mm. And I was walking down the street that morning, I told my wife, I said, let's walk out the waterfront. And I told her, I said, man, I never seen a place, this is like Manila. New Orleans. And we was walking along there, and I looked in through that bar, and I seen old Sandbad the Sailor sitting in there, and I said, I know that fella. We went in there and sat down and ordered up a coat and sitting there, and after a while he jumped up and he kept looking, you know, and he said, oh, he said, I can't call your name, but he said, I know you from Leesville, Louisiana. And he said, I sent that message, and I said, well, then I know who he was. So he got out and got up through China and went on to England and was bombed off a boat. He come back and he's on a run to South America, out of New Orleans.
Is that right?
So it's kind of a small world.
It is, yeah.
And then another incident, while I'm talking about it, that happened. Me and that guy was working for Santa Clara Lumber Company, and we used to fly down to Zamboanga down there. That's where them Igorotis was, down there in the Philippines, you know.
The what were?
Igorotis. You know, you see that in the paper where they just found some people that never had clothes on here. Been 4 or 5 years ago, I guess. And they was talking about fighting them people over there to being uncivilized. And I said, well, all them Iraqis, I said, they speak English.
It's a lot of them.
And this guy was from Fullerton, and he's working for Sinclair Oil Company. He walked up on the line down there on the airstrip one day where we was at, and I asked him, I said, where are you from? He said, I'm working, what you doing out here? I said, I'm working at the air depot in the Philippines. He said, well, I'm working for Sinclair Lumber Company, you know. And he's way down there in that Igoroti country.
Mr. Perkins, let me ask you, how many people do you think you took out of the dead pile?
Out of the death pile?
Yeah, about how many?
Oh, I'd say we took about 10, I mean.
10. Do you think did they all survive?
I don't know. That's the only report I've ever had about it.
I see, yeah.
I don't have no idea.
Okay.
He and my younger brother went to San Diego a few years ago for a reunion, and he met a woman who was a child on that last track out with him, and she got wounded in the foot when the Japs were shooting at
She
them.
was 12 years old.
And Daddy remembered her as the little girl that got hurt.
Is that right?
Oh, she is in
Isn't that something?
Kansas City. She's just out of Kansas City. I forgot their name. I give you the book. You got the book, eh?
Years old when that all happened, she said. She went
And that boy of mine bought the book. He's in the crossfire. That was the Japanese when they were coming in, and they was before they ever got in the prison camp. But she's 12 years old. She wrote a book. I let several people read it, and it's quite a story. You ready?
All righty. Well, thank you, folks. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, I hope you got something out of it.
Well, we sure did.